Hello, my name is Fergal O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. I have to say I love doing my destination special episodes, and particularly the Irish ones, because they always remind me about what makes this country such a great place to travel in. I have a brand new series coming up over the next few months, which will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Wild Atlantic Way, which stretches 2,500 kilometres along the west coast of Ireland from Donegal to Cork. The first two episodes will focus on Connemara, with interviews with two local hoteliers, Brian MCEvilly from the Cashel House Hotel and Henry Hodgson from Currarevagh House in Oughterard. Both the Cashel House Hotel and Currarevagh House are part of Ireland's Blue Book collection, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and both hotels were founding members. I love the Blue Book because they're mostly family owned and Irish run country house hotels, manor houses, castles and restaurants. You really get to see Irish hospitality at its best, and the properties are generally old houses, so you get a sense of the real history of the area you're staying in. A Blue Book voucher would always be top of my travel gift recommendations, and their website is irelands-blue-book.ie. Situated in the heart of Connemara, Cashel House Hotel overlooks the majestic Cashel Bay on the west coast of Ireland. This classic country house retreat was built in the 19th century, converted to a family-run 4-star hotel in 1968 by the MCEvilly family. I had a great chat with Brian about Connemara, the Wide Atlantic Way, his tips and recommendations, and the history of his family's hotel. So let's hear now from Brian. Brian, you're very welcome to the podcast. Great to see you.
Thank you very much for the invite. Lovely to speak to you.
I can see the sun shining through the window there. So can you tell us what part of the country? So you're in the Cashel House Hotel. What part of the country is it, just to let people know?
We're in Cashel and Connemara, right over on the west coast. We're about an hour's drive from Galway City as you'd head out towards Roundstone and Clifton. And we're situated at the base of Cashel Hill overlooking Cashel Bay. So we're situated right on the Atlantic. I'd say it's about 10 minutes drive from the little fishing village of Roundstone.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an amazing part of the world, isn't it?
There's nowhere better when you get the sun shining like this with the number of beaches and everything we have. I actually had guests this morning telling me they were out swimming on Dogs Bay this morning. So a little bit chilly, but when the sun is out, there's nowhere better.
How far is Dogs Bay from you, actually?
About 9 minutes drive. And you've got two beaches back to back. You've Dogs Bay and Gurteen Beach, and there's a fantastic peninsula and a walk out there as well. So you can go swimming, or you can do a lovely there's a 3-hour walk up along by the peninsula there, and you can see porpoises and seals and everything from the end of the peninsula.
I'd always go. That beach is probably the whole, the two beaches. I always think of them just as one, but probably one of the most beautiful beaches in Ireland. Like it's the sand is so white. And the colour of the water, it's like tropical.
Many, many years ago, the Italian government came to the county council looking to buy the sand from the Gurteen Beach. They were going to skim down about 2 feet down and take this whole top layer to bring the sand back to Italy. But thankfully, they disagreed and they wouldn't sell it. But that's how popular and how great that sand, the beaches are. We take them for granted in Ireland, but when you go abroad, they'd do anything to have the same beaches that we have.
I can imagine if that had happened. And Joe, just when you mentioned Italy there, something I do want to ask you about, like your very famous guest, Charles de Gaulle. He was one of the most, he was one of the first guests that you had. Now, like, when was that? What year? Was that 69?
It was in May 69. Yeah, my parents bought the house in 67 and they had just opened it in 68. So we were relatively unheard of. And when General de Gaulle had come over, he was booked into a property down in Sneem, but the media got wind of it. So he was hounded when he was there. So Fáilte Ireland at the time were looking for a quiet location. And where we were, and we weren't very well known, they booked us out, and they booked us out for 2 weeks for him to, or actually it was for a week, first of all, for him to stay. And then we weren't told who was coming until the very last minute. So unfortunately, we didn't have a bed large enough for him because he was a very tall gentleman. So we had to cut the end off a bed and hand sew it and build it onto another double bed to make it long enough for him to fit in the bed. And he stayed on for 2 weeks, and he would have stayed longer, such was his enjoyment of Connemara. But we had a wedding booked, and the wedding couple were very gracious, and they offered to allow him to stay for another week, and they were going to delay their wedding, but he wouldn't hear of it. He wouldn't allow,
Yeah.
putting anybody out. So he was out walking on the beaches on the coastline of Connemara every day, and when he came back, he used to write his memoirs.
He was 6'5", wasn't he? He was
Yeah,
huge.
he was. He was very tall, and his wife was very small. She was just over 5 foot. But he was a very gentleman. He was
Yeah.
very quiet, very
Wasn't
nicely
he?
spoken. And when he came, he really put Cashel on the map. Connemara as well. There's a great affinity ever since General de Gaulle had stayed with us. We get about 15% to 20% of our guests every year come from France.
No way.
And we have, like, Connemara itself is synopsis with the French, and they have a great affinity to traveling Connemara either along by the coastlines or looking through the lakes in the centre of Connemara.
I was reading about the about your hotel, about the history of it, and it's funny. It's nearly like the history of Irish tourism. And you mentioned there about France, wasn't it in Paris where a Fáilte Ireland person kind of got your hotel, your mother and father together with other hotels with the idea of the Blue Book. I thought it was so far thinking ahead, really, wasn't it?
It was, and it was really back at the time when my parents bought the hotel and were running it. You had people like Hazel Allen doing Ballymaloe and kind of trying to put Ireland as a destination for the US market and and for the European market, because there was very little domestic business in Ireland at the time. So what we found was, or what my parents found was, that guests coming to stay at the hotel were mentioning the same properties that they were traveling from and where they were going to next. And when they were at one of these meetings, Fáilte Ireland came up to them and said, you guys should get together and form an association to market, because there was no association. And back then it was very expensive. And as there was no domestic market, you really were dependent on the US, the UK, and mainland Europe as a market for tourism in Ireland. And the Blue Book just went from strength to strength. And they had two great leaders. Hilary Finlay was the secretary of the Blue Book, and she was a real driving force at the beginning. And they built up the membership very, very quickly as people saw the advantages to doing that. And then Michelle Maguire and her team are now running it. And they've very successfully run it as a marketing company, and they're selling vouchers. And the standard and the quality of the properties has changed somewhat with the changing times. Back in its initial conception, it was properties based on, similar estates of a high standard, focusing on local produce, local food. And now it's expanded into association, which has restaurants, private venue hires, obviously hotels, but they'd have city hotels, country hotels. But the staple at the time back then was the small family-owned country house hotel.
Just last year, it celebrated its 50th anniversary.
That's correct, yeah. And thankfully, there are still a few of us out there which are still family-owned, they're still operated, and we're here many years later, trials and tribulations, trying to go through it. I mean, it's been a battle. It's incredible what they did and what they achieved,
Yeah.
and it's a group effort with the whole of the Blue Book when they started off, because the times that they were in when they were actually starting off were very hard times, and there were no grants available. There was nothing to help you. There was no assistance because the government didn't have the money. There was no
Mm.
schemes back then. There was no training. There was none of that was in place. My father used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get in the car, drive down to Rossaville to get the fish for breakfast, and drive back again. And like when I grew up in the 80s, I thought working in the hotel was a hard work. But I mean, compared to what they had to do, it was so much easier. And again, this current generation, things are easier and easier in the business. But it's a vocation as opposed to a job. And people who are in this industry, it's a difficult industry. And it always has been. And the more hotels that are in it, you're fighting more to try and keep your place within that business. And people's standards are now so high, they expect to have everything that they would get from a four-star hotel or a three-star or five-star, as the case may be. And you need to be on the ball, and you need to be able to be aware of what they're looking for when they come in. For us, I always feel that as long as we have a good standard of a property, good standard bedrooms, the really big USB we have is how our staff interact with the people when they come. It's that 55 years of history and of that built up business. I mean, 60% of our guests that come to us are repeat clients. And I mean that word of mouth or repeat to come back. We're on third and fourth generation people coming here. We've had a wedding and they used to come here when they were 5 and 6 and they got married here. And that's a huge following, so it is. And like Ray here, 45 years as a manager, and the connections that he had with the people that are coming in, they're his friends. They're not just his guests or his clients when they come in. And he's fortunate in that he has a photographic memory. So when they come in, he can remember details that it surprises him the whole time. You know, what wine they had when they were here 8 years ago.
It's funny, like you're celebrating the Blue Book, the 50th anniversary, but also the Wild Atlantic Way. There's been a lot of press about it over the last few days, over the last few weeks, talking about this year's the 10th anniversary.
And the Wild Atlantic Way has been a huge success for Fáilte Ireland. It is known by all of the travel agents and tour operators abroad. So the 10 years that have passed has influenced the tourism that comes to the area. And the Wild Atlantic Way, Galway would have been kind of a big main stop for people traveling from Dublin or coming up. And a lot of tours and a lot of smaller groups and families wouldn't have ventured much further west from Galway. And now with the advertisements that's been done with the Wild Atlantic Way, a lot more people are now willing to go to the rural areas where the roads are a bit more windy, a bit more potholes than they'd normally be used to. But they ventured to it and they found kind of this little gem there's a green gem that you'd have of Connemara. And there's just so much to see and do in the area.
You know, it's amazing. I mean, it has to be one of the great marketing ideas, of all time, like the Wide Atlantic Way. I saw a figure, annual spend now of 3 billion. And I think the number of tourists have gone up between 2013 or 14 to now is like 58%. So it's been a huge success, hasn't it?
Oh, it has, and very noticeably so. We would have benefited greatly from the Wild Atlantic Way, as would an awful lot of more rural areas. It brought new markets to you that you never really had before. We wouldn't have had many from the Netherlands or from Scandinavia or from those distant markets. The US, the UK, France, Germany would have been our main markets. But now we're finding an awful lot more tourists coming in from other directions, and they're driving the Wild Atlantic Way, stopping at different properties along the Wild Atlantic Way. And it's from Donegal all the way down south. It's just been a great success. But if both Fáilte and Fáilte Ireland over the years have always fought kind of above their weights in the ring of international marketing, and they've always had great ideas and great scope. And I think a lot of places are actually trying to emulate what they've done. And they continue to do so. I've come back just from France from a tour around Lyon, Paris. We went up to Nantes, and they're constantly delving into new areas, new markets, doing small one-to-one meetings with agents. And it's just kind of reintroducing Ireland to kind of new markets, as well as keeping the connections with the old markets. And they're so popular now, you have a waiting list to try and get spaces.
Wow. And I thought it was interesting. Like, I think it was Condé Nast this year had the Wide Atlantic Way on its hot list. It's still winning loads of awards and getting attention. As you can say, I've noticed that in other countries now, there are a lot of places are like, particularly France, are trying to do similar sorts of things, which is obviously a great sign. Do you notice people go up the Wild Atlantic Way, staying with you, or going down the Wild Atlantic Way?
They're kind of coming from both directions. It used to always be coming up from the south. So we'd normally get people coming up from Blue Book properties down, like from Ballymaloe, Gregan's Castle to ourselves. They'd be going to Rossleague or Currarevagh and Connemara. Then they'd be moving up further north. But now, with the advent of Game of Thrones and the popularity of what that has done, you find that people will come into Dublin Airport mostly and they'll travel north now as well
Wow.
as traveling south. So it's no longer always coming in and then heading down south. Now they're heading up north and they're coming down. For Connemara, it's quite unique in the sense that we're kind of the halfway point. If they're doing a 7 day or a 10 day tour, they go up north and they come round, and near the last 2 or 3 days of their tour, they end up in Connemara and then they cut across country. Or if they're coming up from the south, again, the halfway point is around Connemara. So we always generally tend to be on kind of the last 3 or 4 days of the tour, and we benefit greatly from that.
Yeah, because they're willing to stay a couple of days, and that must be lovely talking to people that have just done that, either from the top or the bottom. They must be on a high by the time they get to you.
It's actually getting more and more difficult to speak to guests about what to do and see in the local area now, especially if they're Irish, because they've been here so many times. We're open 55 years this year, so we have an awful lot of repeat customers. Sure, they know the area better than I do. They know the roads, they know the Bohereens. They've been to more places and explored more places in Connemara, and they actually start informing us of what they've done and what they've seen. But yeah, there's a huge amount for them, and we're lucky for that because our average stay would be between 2.5 and 3 days would be our average stay, and that means that they get to do the Aran Islands, they get to do a full day tour out. They go from Rossaville across on the boat. It's only about a 30-minute drive over, and of course they can see all three islands now quite easily. And then you have a day in by touring around by Roundstone into the beaches we just spoke about, Dogs Bay, Gurchin Beach, into Ballyconneely, and they can do horse riding on the beach from Ballyconneely. They can go all the way into Clifton and do the famous Sky Road and do the view from that. And then you're going up into northern part of Connemara, up to where the Kylemore Abbey is, which is one of probably the most photographed and best known locations within Connemara. And you have the National Park and you have the Diamond Hill. But what we found over the years is it's actually the older generation are now the more active. If you have 30 to 40-year-olds staying, they'll drive to a destination and go out and do a swim or go for an activity. But it's the older generations that are really active. And they're the ones doing the hiking. They're the ones wanting the guided historic tours. And they're literally gone from like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and they don't come back until 6 or 6:30 in the evening, and they have a full day tour and hiking done. So it's people are really since COVID even more so. They're getting out and exploring, and in all weathers.
Yeah, and you're famous for your gardens. Are you into the gardening as much as your mother?
I'm afraid not. We've been very fortunate. We've been able to find a French gentleman, Giles. He moved over from France, and I always remember I had an advertisement up because I knew my limitations. I don't have green fingers like my mother or my grandmother had, and none of my family, my brother Frank and my sister Lucy, wouldn't have green fingers either. So we looked for a gardener, and he came up for the interview, and he said, "I'm here to work in the hotel." I said, no. I said, "You're here for the interview to look for the position." He goes, "Okay, okay, we can talk, but I'm coming here to work." And I said, "Right." He said, "No." He said, "You don't understand. I have a company in France, and one of my clients was an ex-president, and I hear that General de Gaulle had stayed here in the hotel." He said, "I'm coming here to work." And he's been fantastic ever since.
Wow.
A lot of the knowledge, but also Boyd is in the garden. He's been working with my mother for about the last 14 to 16 years, and he knows the effect of the wild or the effect of the Gulf Stream on the land. He knows when the bulbs are planting because everything in our garden flowers earlier than most of Ireland, simply because the Gulf Stream keeps the land temperature so warm. But every owner of the house, since it was built in 1840, has had a keen gardener at its core. And the very first gentleman was very smart or very knowledgeable. He planted trees, and he planted a lot of trees to create the shelter. And once he did that, that helped create a microclimate for a lot of rare trees and plants to grow in the gardens. And yeah, we have about 50 acres now, and we have garden tours and walks. And back in the day when my mum was doing it, she was doing garden courses, teaching people how to look after the gardens and that. For us, we would probably, I suppose, being a country house open for 55 years, one of our biggest attractions would really be the experience the guests have when they come here. And that would be from, I suppose, meeting the staff. I mean, we have a manager, Ray, who's been with us for 45 years this year. The chef in the kitchen, Arthur, has been with us for over 20 years. His two daughters manage and run the dining room there, which is about 18 years now. Barbara, who runs housekeeping, is there about 38 years. So when people come back and they come back again and again, they're seeing the same people, the same faces, and the girls are welcoming them back each time they come. And that's an experience that you can't get everywhere. And a lot of the smaller properties, the family-run properties, still have that available. And then, of course, the location itself, to be within 30 minutes drive of all these key scenic areas is a great thing to have. I mean, to be able to go out to the islands, to Inishbofin, to the Aran Islands, and then to have the castle. So you have kind of an indoor tour that you can do if the weather isn't good, or you have kind of the outdoor when the weather is fantastic. And then you have like Clifton, where you'd have, Irish music on in every second pub during the summertime. There's just so many different things right on our doorstep. And that's, I suppose, the enjoyment of the industry is servicing guests when they come in and giving them a memory and trying to get them to go out and explore and see the area and not just follow kind of the guidebooks. Let them go off the beaten track, because that's really the beauty, going down the side road and finding a small little beach that's only maybe, 10 foot by 12 foot, and yet nobody else on the whole beach, and it's all yours for the whole day. That's kind of the beauty of it.
I must you won an award with Georgina Campbell just before Christmas, which is really cool. So that's Pet Friendly Hotel of the Year.
Yeah. My mother has always been a lover of animals, be they dogs, hens, chickens, cats, you name it. And we had two Irish wolfhounds for many, many years here at the hotel. So you couldn't really have wolfhounds outside and not be pet friendly. So we're pet friendly in the old school way, where the dogs are allowed into the bedrooms, and we have one room downstairs where the owners can sit down and have a coffee or a drink when the dogs are there. We don't allow them in the dining room. But we've become really, really popular as a pet-friendly destination. We're nearly up to the same stage as what they have in the UK, but we're not quite there yet. A lot more hotels are becoming to realise that owners of pets, they're not just pets to be put out in the kennels, they're part of a family. And during COVID, it was explained to me by a pet psychiatrist that the owners and the dogs both suffer anxiety after being together for 2 years, nearly inseparable, that now when things go back to what it was before, that they're both feeling a bit of anxiety if they leave the pets in a kennel and they go away for a week or 2 weeks holidays. So more and more people are now bringing their pets with them when they travel. We used to have 25% of our rooms pet friendly. We now have 50% of our rooms pet friendly.
I know you mentioned about your mother loving dogs, and she's an amazing character, and your father, as I said, the kind of their story is learning the story of Irish tourism, reading about how they started off and it was like English market, and then around the time of Bloody Sunday, then you went into Blue Book, and then the American market and 9/11. It's also a story of how you had to keep adapting. And then now it's a lot of Irish tourists, probably after COVID. It's amazing how the market changes over time, and your parents were such visionaries that they could see that.
They were, but I think they definitely were, and there was a few people, in the background who were spearheading tourism in Ireland, as well as hotellery, and trying to bring the standard up. My father had trained in Shannon Hotel School, and he was over in London for a number of years, training as well, and Dorchester. And then he returned to Ireland. He met my mother in the Prince of Wales in Athlone. And I think they moved from there to the Ardlon in Galway, and then from there out to Glinsk. And then they saw Cashel House came up for sale for the grand sum of €12,000, and they purchased it. But they purchased it at a time when there was no internal business within Ireland, and the prospects were quite bleak. but they had great faith in the area. And I remember saying to him, did you not worry about the location? It was so far away from Galway. Back then, it was nearly a 2 hour drive. And he said, that's the attraction. He said, as soon as they put a motorway out here, it'll change what the attraction is. He
Wow.
said, if you have a product and it's good enough, he said, they'll beat a path to your door. And I think a lot of hoteliers, I believe Ballymaloe was much the same. There were horse and traps passing by, and they were knocking on the door looking for a place to stay. And again, it was the vision and the foresight to see that there was a business there and a market to be had. But again, most of the hoteliers who started off in Ireland's Blue Book would have had a vision of a certain quality and a certain standard that they would have had internal to themselves. And they brought that with them. There wasn't anybody in Ireland telling them you should be doing this and you should have this standard. It was something that they knew themselves, that they wanted themselves. So when they got together, they were very like-minded people.
Yeah.
But they had to push and advertise and market the country as much as they did themselves. They realized that there's no point in kind of marketing or going on your own, because it was the whole area. People had to be educated of what Ireland had. And it was the fledgling days of Lord Fáilte as well. And thankfully, it just grew from strength to strength to strength.
I was tell you a good one. Literally just before I got on the call with you, I was a guy from Barry McDonald from Waterford rang me, and I just told him I was interviewing you, and he said that he brought his girlfriend, now wife at the time, he brought her to Cashel House to impress her. And then he said that then when they got married, they got loads of Blue Book vouchers. So they've been all over the country since then with the Blue Book. So that was a lovely way of kind of showing the connection.
Yeah, look, and look, fair play to the Blue Book team. They have done a fantastic job with the Blue Book vouchers. It has been a tremendous success, and it flies in the face of more normal, traditional hotel groups philosophy of going online, doing everything online, which they do. But it's the personal thing of having the voucher, sending it out, and talking directly to the people who come in. And I think that's the difference between a group like the Ireland's Blue Book and some of the others out there. There is that personal touch from the very first touch.
Yeah, and you know what? And the thing I love about it is that one, they don't, there's no sell by date, or they don't go out. And the other thing is, we definitely, because we got loads for our wedding as well, and we kind of lost some, but you kind of contact them and they have all the details. You just get it back, which is brilliant.
And it's the old philosophy. If somebody comes in and they have something and, oh, we have a Blue Book voucher, but we didn't bring it with us, there's, okay, that's fine, no problem. Give us your name and the details. We'll ring one of the
Yeah.
girls and they'll pull up all the details. And it's just always been that way. They don't expire and they don't devalue over time. We had a voucher handed in last year that was, oh, I think it was about 12 years old, and they literally thought that there was no chance it would work. And it was actually a photocopy of the voucher, not the original voucher.
Wow.
But lo and behold, rang up the head office and they had the details and all that within about 10, 15 minutes.
So brilliant. So thank you so much for your time. Just the last question then, is there one spot, whether it's our activity, it can be anything, or even a restaurant or anything you pick. There's one place that you would recommend outside the hotel to go to for a visitor. What would it be?
For me, I like fishing, so it's really doing sea fishing. My father used to always bring us out in the boat fishing when I was young. So whenever I can, there's Pat Keneally in Roundstone, and he brings you out in the boat for sea fishing. And he stops off on the way, and there's lobster pots in it, so you can pick up a lobster if you're lucky on the way as well. So even if you don't catch a fish or you don't catch what you want that day, you're good chance you bring a lobster back to the house when you're coming home. Um, the sea would be for me. I fishing in Loch Corrib was quite good as well in Currarevagh. So I suppose for me to get away, if I do get away, it's to get out and do a day's fishing if I can.
So that is the beauty of Irish hospitality. You know what I mean? It's a natural thing. It's
I
not
have
fake.
I think that sums it up. It's going back quite a few years when Bono stayed here. He was a frequent guest over a number of years, but he was walking back the road one day and he walked around the corner and this woman came out, Keneally came out to the wall and said, "Oh, Bono, how are you? Come on in here for a cup of tea. I want to have a chat with you." And she opened up the gate. He walked in and he sat down. She made him a cup of tea and he was there for an hour chatting with her on the thing. And that's just pure natural. And she wasn't doing it for bragging rights or anything.
Yeah.
He literally wanted to ask him a few questions, have a chat. And there are people still here that the front door, when they go into Clifton shopping for their weekly shopping, the front door and the windows are left wide open in the houses. And when you see people coming down from Dublin or out from Galway and all that, they're blown away by that relaxed atmosphere. And it shows you the relaxation of the area, of the people, and how that they're not kind of worried. People don't turn on their car alarm when they hop out of their car and they park up. That's not the mentality that's here. You don't hide your money on the dashboard of your car or the side of your car. None of that's needed out here. And so there's all that kind of relaxed kind of atmosphere. And then it transmits into the communication that people have when they're out walking around. Funny down the Gaeltacht sometimes we'd have Americans going and he goes, they're all speaking Irish to me but it's the accent. They can't understand the accent. The really South Connemara accent is a deep accent. And they come back and they kind of say, oh, they were only speaking Irish, they wouldn't speak English. But in actual fact, they were speaking English to them.
Classic. They said couldn't understand the word they were saying.
Yeah.
But that must be so special, like, if you're a tourist, like American, and even to hear people even speaking Irish, a little bit of Irish or the traditional music, I just think you just can't beat that.
Now, the music since, I suppose, Riverdance, there's been a big interest in that from people coming. They all want to see the dancing as well. It's not just going out listening, they want to see the dancing. And there's one or two pubs now in Clifton and they'll have the Seanas dancing, which is what the Irish dancing kind of derived from. It would be kind of the older type of dancing where the arms are not strict down by the side and they don't wear the uniform. It's a more free-flowing type of Irish dancing. And it's become very, very popular. A lot of places are having that out. So when people come, I think in Roundstone, they're in the hall there, I think it was every Thursday, they used to have a bit of a show on. And the people would be coming here and they'd actually stay at the hotel because they heard about it. It's not just obviously ourselves, but when you go into Clifton, you go into the shops and all of that, that Irish welcome is still there. And a lot of people thought it was gone, but it's not.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Thank you so much, Brian.
Not at all a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Brian as much as I did doing it. And now, if you'd like to hear more about Connemara, I'd recommend you jump straight to part 2 of our Connemara Destination special with Henry Hodgson from Currarevagh House, who talks all about another part of Connemara, which is, as well as the Wild Atlantic Way, it's also all about Loch Corrib and fishing. Here's a little clip from that. So I'd recommend that episode's up now, go straight to it.
People know Corrib as a mayfly lake. Traditionally the towns are busy to such an extent that they used to give a week off school, national school, so the kids could go out selling mayflies to tourists and so on, and which still happens. You get kids standing on the street corners with boxes of mayflies selling a dozen for €2, and that's how they make a bit of pocket money. But the fishing is still very good. The lake, thank goodness, is in good condition. There's plenty of fish in it. It's still an amazing way to spend the day. I love it. Loch Corrib is the most beautiful lake, absolutely unspoiled. It's like a different century, you can go out there and not see anything, just deserted islands, amazing history on it, beautiful vistas, just escapism really.
I also want to thank the Blue Book, who have 63 properties all over Ireland, and I highly recommend people, if you're looking for a lovely place to stay, family run, the Blue Book is the one. Check their website, irelands-blue-book.ie. I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal. Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.